They say that 5th edition can't handle high-level play, but I think that's false. I've run more than 50 D&D sessions at level 17s and above, and I challenged the players, and they saved the world, killed gods, and it was amazing. High-level play can be truly epic. But how do you do it? How do you change your mindset from the one that's been running goblins and orcs to one that's all about god-like creatures? It's actually a lot easier than it might seem. Have you taken a look at Tiamat lately? Welcome to Mystic Arts, where we resist the urge to call this gargantuan goddess mommy. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 10 years. From 2018 to 2024, I ran an epic D&D campaign that started at level 1 and ended at level 20. It ran for 216 sessions, split across 6 adventures. It featured God knows how many super high-level boss battles, and Tiamat was the penultimate end boss of that campaign, just before the BBEG showed up. It was an epic fight. The whole time the party was on death's door, waiting to see if they'd perish against the Queen of Dragons. They knew if they lost, the world would be forever changed before the final showdown of the campaign. The stakes were high. So how did I actually do that? How did I make a satisfying, legendary battle? In this video, we're taking an investigative look at Tiamat as a character, as a concept, and as a stat block. We're breaking it down into 5 parts. 1 for each head. From the meta background to her backstory, adventure premise, the stakes inherent to her existence, and how to properly run her in combat. Then we'll bring it all together into what Tiamat teaches us about high-level play.
This video is a part of Monster Week. It's an annual Dungeon Tuber event organized by Pointy Hat and Ginny D. During this week, all your favorite creators are talking about dragons. It's huge, there's a bunch of collaborations, and it's kind of amazing. If you want to know more about Dragon Week, there are links in the description.
So, settle in, grab a snack, and we'll talk about the delightfully infamous Queen of Dragons. When 5th edition launched back in 2014, the Wizards of the Coast advertising push was colossal, as big as they could manage with the resources they had at the time. At least as much as the D&D branch had, they were running out of cash. 4th edition had been a market failure, and there was only one way forward. They had to use a political term, broaden the tent. In other words, they had to appeal to as big of an audience as they possibly could, or the company would crash and burn. A broad tent meant simplifying the game to appeal to new audiences, bringing back a lot of classic modules and characters to appeal to people who played back in the day, and trying to synthesize previous editions into a truly definitive edition of D&D. This new edition was supposed to be all of the good old stuff and none of the bad old stuff, and they wanted to end edition wars and unite their audience. Sort of like casting Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. He's a bit of Moore, a bit of Connery, with Dalton and Lazenby sort of sprinkled in there. This new edition of D&D largely succeeded in those goals. It offended very few people, especially when compared to previous editions. It inspired loads of people to try the game and greatly expanded the role-playing game hobby. I mean, look at the glut of new games that have been published since then. Since Wizards of the Coast wanted broad and palatable appeal, they ended up with a fairly plain product. But this, they argued, was its virtue. You could play all kinds of games within the system, with all kinds of people. It didn't limit itself to a certain kind of nerd or a specific kind of fantasy. Looking back, the edition benefited massively from outside factors like Critical Role or Stranger Things. And you could certainly argue that those outside factors were a bigger contributor to the success of 5th edition than anything else. But if 5e hadn't been there to catch the ball when it got batted at them, if 3rd or 4th edition had experienced those same windfalls, it's not clear to me whether they would have found the same success. 5e was a perfect storm of happenstance, a somewhat simple system ready to receive a new wave of players thanks to a bona fide cultural zeitgeist. So remember that massive advertising push I mentioned? WotC didn't advertise mechanics, or dice, or roleplay, or classes. They had a very simple message. Tiamat! Here's a dragon with 5 heads. Don't you want to play this game? There's a dragon with 5 heads in it. If you walked into a friendly local game store in 2014 to 2016, the D&D section might have had a massive logo up, but it didn't say New Edition or Roll with Advantage. It just had a huge poster of the Rise of Tiamat cover art. Frankly, I think that's an inspired choice. It worked on me, and it got me to switch systems. I mean, how could I not? She looks cool as hell. Since the dawn of 5th edition, Tiamat has been associated with the game, more iconic than ever before. She's kind of the synthesis of 5th edition's marketing. That poster art was a pull for old players as much as new. She had classic appeal. Tiamat's 50th birthday was in January of 2025. She first appeared in the Greyhawk supplement back in 1975, and 2 years later in the AD&D Monster Manual, close enough, the D&D cartoon even featured Tiamat in the first episode. Tiamat is so iconic to D&D. Some of you might not know that Tiamat actually doesn't originate in D&D. This grand figure was known as the primordial sea in ancient Mesopotamian religion. Historical texts describe her as Ummu-Hubur, who formed all things. Made in addition weapons invincible, she spawned monster serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she clothed with terror, with splendor she decked them. She made them lofty stature. Whoever beheld them, terror overcame him. Even back in Mesopotamia, she was considered ancient. But of course, you shouldn't ask a lady her age, much less a queen. Now, some of you might ask, if she's basically a primordial elemental creature based on human mythology, why is she a 5-headed dragon in D&D? And I think there's a good point to be raised here. There's always something powerful about evoking real-life mythology at your table when you can. That is, if your players don't revolt at hearing about those specific names. But I'm Icelandic, and my players got excited when I decided to introduce the god of fire giants, Surtur, into my game. That's Norse mythology, and we're all cool with it. I mean, why should Marvel get to have all the fun? At least we're actually Norse. There's something deeply powerful about names we've heard before, whether we know them from specific myth or faint memories. They can evoke a certain kind of association. In my campaign setting, there's a floating city in the plane of air called Babylon, and a city in the plane of water called Atlantis. Why not? It invokes the right kind of feeling, and I'm not hidebound by the real history of Babylon or the totally real history of Atlantis. My players have never been to those cities in-game, but it doesn't matter. The places feel like they're more real exactly because the names are stolen from a collective cultural memory. You can leverage your players' pre-existing knowledge of Earth, the most popular campaign setting, to create meaning behind the names you say. Meaning that could be developed through years of roleplay and adventuring, or you could do it in a single name drop. Nothing like this has occurred since the fall of Shangri-La. My players will follow that up with, do I know what Shangri-La is? I feel like I've heard it before. Yeah, I bet they have. In filmmaking, there is this concept of cinematic memory, or film motifs. The idea being that an audience's memory of tropes creates expectation, an understanding that supersedes the need for explanation. When you watch the hero ride off into the sunset, you know they'll live happily ever after. The movie doesn't have to tell you that also. Or when someone says, I'm going to Paris, and then smash cut to the Eiffel Tower, you don't need anything else. We already know everything there is to know. They went to Paris. But this exists more subtly too. Like when you're watching a TV show and the flashbacks are shot on film while all the modern day stuff is shot digitally. The showrunners can then start mixing styles to play with your emotions. Or in animation, when characters are animated on different frame rates to indicate changing skill levels. In fantasy role-playing games, myth, history, and tropes are a shortcut to investment and understanding. But what does all that have to do with Tiamat though? Well, she's not just got a cultural memory. She's got something even stronger. She's got lore. Dark Lady, hear my prayer. Let me speak to you, my undying queen. I swear fealty to the many-mawed nemesis of gods, and vow to serve her who slew the platinum dragon.
Rise, filthy mortal, and prove your worth. Dedicate this video to me.
As you command. Deep within Avernus, the first layer of hell, beyond the monuments of draconic skulls, buried inside the infernal rocks is a prison built to contain the Queen of Dragons. Only nobody knows why she's in there, or how she was defeated, or who defeated her. This leads to theorizing. Is she really a prisoner, or is that just what she wants us to think? And if so, why? What schemes could she possibly be spinning? Why is it important that we believe she's imprisoned in hell? And if not, who defeated her? Bahamut? Why then was she locked in hell? Did Asmodeus defeat her? When did they even fight? Or did Bahamut strike a bargain with Asmodeus? On what terms? The books don't say, so you get to decide. What's great about Tiamat is the amount of lore that exists about her. The breadth is so massive that you can't go wrong. Let's take a look at the lore intensity bell curve. You see, the Mystic Arts regularly featured BBEG, the Screaming Mass, is here, so far to the left of the bell curve that there really isn't anything known about it. Therefore, you, the DM, can put it in your own game. It can mean whatever you want it to. There is no lore to hinder you. Over here, in the middle, the intensity of the lore is so concentrated that you can really only use the creature under highly specific circumstances. This is where Githyanki are, for instance. Their art style has remained consistent since the Fiend Folio. Their lore as slaves of mind flayers, broken free to destroy their slavers and hunt them down across the multiverse, is established and well known. Tiamat, on the other hand, is all the way to the right. There is so much lore about her, and it's all a little contradictory or retconned, revised, revisited, that you could really decide what to do, and you could do whatever you wanted, and nobody would even know. Is she secretly the dragon god Azarul from the dragon spawn pits in Dragon's Eyrie? Sure. Or maybe she's an ancient red dragon mythic sovereign named Chazar ruling over Luthchek. Why not? Maybe she's Takisis, a leader of Kryn's evil gods and a queen of darkness. Yeah, that works too. Is she serving Asmodeus? Got her own plans? Essential to destroying the Wand of Orcus and the Throne of the Bloodstone? Yeah, all of those things. Or none of them. Just make up a dope adventure and fight a dragon with 5 heads at the end. There are so many different canonical versions of Tiamat, it's like a bunch of Loki variants. They're all Loki, which means that Tiamat kind of exists in your campaign setting by default if you want to use her. If you've got dragons and they're chromatic and you haven't decided why they're there, Tiamat is an easy answer that also generates more questions. The moment you breathe her name out loud at the table, the weight of the combined cultural memory and D&D lore will carry her forward into a certain sort of mythic status. Her multiversal prevalence also makes it easy to find stuff out about her online. You can find loads of art, 50 years of official and third-party adventures, boundless wiki pages, and even stuff like this. The creature's sheer size cannot be fully perceived. Godlike would be an appropriate descriptor. The scaled and bulbous body holds itself upright on clawed limbs, balancing with the use of a massive tail, tipped with a wicked barb. Multiple heads, 5 in all, emerge from the body on serpent-like necks. A black dragon, eyes narrow and cunning. A blue dragon, lightning forking from its maw. A green dragon, smoke curling from its nostrils. A red dragon, flames spitting from between its teeth. And a white dragon, frost pluming from its mouth. That description comes from dScryb.com, which is the sponsor of today's video. And Tiamat is so iconic that you can just go on dScryb and search for Dragon Queen and get immediate results. There's loads of descriptions on their website along with maps and soundscapes and more, not just related to Tiamat, all kinds of things. If you want a 30-day free trial, you can use the promo code MysticArts on any plan they offer. There's also a referral link in the description. Tiamat's giant collection of lore is a treasure trove you should not be afraid to rob. Look at pre-existing adventures, wiki pages, or whatever you can find to create a whole mythos around her by tying her into your setting. I bet you'll get inspired. Here are a few tidbits that caught my eye while doing a bit of research for this script. Did you know that she has a human form, appearing as a woman with dark hair and completely black eyes? Could that be a powered-down version that she uses to travel to the material plane while she's imprisoned? How about the fact that she frequently pretends to be other gods, or that her followers trick others into worshipping her? She's got schemes to collect new followers with lies and deceit. One of your players could be praying to her without even knowing it. Also, did you know that it isn't actually clear what creature type she is? Like, mechanically, she can be classified as a dragon or as a fiend. The two 5e stat blocks disagree. Tiamat's name threatens a history of truly epic proportions. But here's the real clincher. All of that lore would be useless were it not for one simple fact. Tiamat comes pre-packaged with her own premise. Tiamat is going to destroy the multiverse. She's a god above all chromatic evil dragons. She's got plans that match that title. She wants to destroy not just the material plane, but every plane in existence and rebuild reality without gods and without primordials, with her at the top and a hierarchy of dragons enslaved to her. That's some arch-villain type of shit. Hell yeah, Tiamat, you big girl boss. slay everyone who isn't a dragon. You might say, that's a massive cliche. Sure, yeah, you're right. BBEG takes over the world. More at 11. No arguments there. This is cliche as hell. But let me counter that with 2 arguments. Argument the first. Your players may have seen a million movies about saving the world from annihilation, but they may not have gotten the chance to save it themselves. Or if they have, I doubt they've done it at this scale. And if they have, well, then they could do it again. Saving the multiverse from a cataclysmic end is what 20th level play is all about. Argument the second. Remember what I was saying about film motifs. They clear the way. Clichés are a tool in your toolbox. Tiamat isn't acting out of character. It makes sense for her to want to annihilate the world. And your heroes need to save the world.
Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it!
They'll get a clear and obvious chance to be the heroes. Even the evil edgelord character will want to save the world they live in, and that's a great springboard for interesting scenes. I remember when I ran my Tiamat adventure, our edgelord rogue / evil wizard character would find themselves allying with all kinds of powerful, good-aligned entities who hated him, but they needed him to kill God. I kept putting him in rooms with bad guys who wanted him to join their team, but he refused to do it because he liked living in the world as it was. Conversely, the good guys hated his guts, but they couldn't be too mean because they needed him to win. It was honestly one of the highlights of that campaign. That's the power of these mythic tier bad guys like Tiamat. She's got a premise baked in. Stop her from annihilating the world. But it's even better than that. Tiamat starts out in prison. And what do fictional prisoners want to do? They want to break out. So on lower level adventures, you could encounter Tiamat's minions, like dragon cultists, who want to break her out of her hellish prison and unleash her into the mortal plane. This could be a ritual that requires the cultists to collect MacGuffins from across the world, maybe conveniently in places the players are already going for unrelated reasons. Those encounters could then escalate to a point where the characters want to research the ritual to summon Tiamat for themselves to figure out where the cultists are heading next. And you're not just limited to cultists either. Since Tiamat is either a dragon or a fiend, maybe usefully both, you can have her cultists send low-level dragons and fiends, like kobolds, half-dragons, and bearded devils, and there's a whole monster manual of creatures for you to paint the level spectrum with. And eventually you'll start using dragons, horned devils, or extended rules characters like Draconians from Dragonlance, or Abishai from Mordenkainen's, or the big reprint of that same book, also called Mordenkainen's. It's a giant collection of monsters you can use to really flesh out your world. And here's how you do it. Designate a certain exciting stat block as your lieutenants, one for each tier of play. Levels 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, 13 through 16, 17 through 20. Then create adventures around those lieutenants and their plans, and you're good to go. This probably shouldn't be the only thing going on in an epic 6-year game, but maybe it's one of 3 plot lines your players are dealing with. We'll tackle campaign creation in a future video, so make sure to subscribe and stick around for that. What's better than 2 premises? 3 premises. At this point in the video, we'd like to acknowledge the fact that Bahamut exists. Tiamat's opposite twin on the other side of the alignment chart is Bahamut, the Platinum Dragon, brother of Tiamat and her eternal rival. What's more is that everything we've said so far about Tiamat's lore also applies to Bahamut. He could be Fizban the Fabulous, Marduk, or Zymor. He could be accompanied by his 7 gold canaries, each of which is an ancient gold dragon in disguise. When your players realize Tiamat's plans, any suggested mention of Bahamut is going to have them wondering if they can gain an ally, whether Bahamut can take care of the problem for them. If you think it should be possible to end the adventure without fighting Tiamat, then that's your release valve. Otherwise, you've got a few options. 1, you could go the typical route of not allowing the gods to intervene. In my setting, there's a sort of mutually assured destruction agreement between the gods called the Seal. This makes it so that gods like Bahamut don't get involved in mortal affairs. 2, you could decide he sends agents like metallic dragons or paladins to help, indirectly assisting the adventures while still keeping his distance. 3, and this is the one I'd go for, Bahamut is real and he could help. The players might search for him only to find him dead, killed by agents of Tiamat through an elaborate ritual. Now, there is no help coming. The players have to deal with this themselves. This is kind of like a Dark Night of the Soul moment, like in film, but transferred to D&D. The weight of responsibility on the player's shoulders will hit like a truck. Trust me. Be careful with this though. It's a wild goose chase with a predetermined ending. It shouldn't last more than a session, and the B-plot of that session should have full agency and meaningful choices. No one likes to be strung along. If putting all of this together is a bit too daunting, you don't have to make up your own stories about Tiamat. There are 2 published adventures for 5th edition that feature her. First is Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which features Lord Soth as the main villain, but he serves what's basically Dragonlance's version of Tiamat, Takisis, the Dragon Queen. I'm sorry, Dragonlance fans. I'm sure you're about to tell me just how wrong I am. It's all about this looming army of dragon men attacking the human lands. And there's a mass combat element too, but only if you buy an entirely separate and accompanying board game. The other adventure is Tyranny of Dragons, which launched with the 5th edition in 2014 and is why all that promo art featured pictures of Tiamat. This adventure was the only one available if you wanted something other than the starter set. I own these adventures in the original 2 parts, Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. I did read Tyranny of Dragons, and fair warning, it's kind of clunky. I think there's loads of good lessons in here, but it's difficult to run without a load of work from the DM. And it wasn't written in-house, it was written by these contractors while the design team was working on 5th edition. So there's loads of weird things in it. Like a group of CR9 assassins that try to randomly assassinate the first level heroes. An attempt that probably succeeds considering how math works. The first chapter is cool though. This green dragon swoops down from the sky to attack the keep the players are in. The players are too low level to reasonably be able to do anything about the dragon, but they can save the town. It's an inspired premise, but it's not rigorously balanced enough to work directly out of the box. To run it, a DM would kind of have to rebuild it from scratch, which is kind of true about this whole book. But again, the premise is strong enough that I feel incentivized to do that. What it all boils down to is the story inherent to the lore, right? Notice how we're not satisfied with knowing the fact that she's sometimes called this or that, or what exactly the wars that imprisoned her were called. It's important to us that she is imprisoned and wants to get out. What happens when she gets out? She destroys the world. Why is it fun to know that she has a human form? Because it might inspire you. If it doesn't, then there's not much value in including it in your campaign. Find the stuff that inspires you and chase that spark all the way to creation, or in the case of playing RPGs, all the way to the gaming table. If the lore doesn't spark anything, you can always ditch it and do your own thing.
Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Don't let someone else's ideas overrule your own. Oh, by the way, the one thing in this adventure that I think is super useful are all these Orbs of Dragonkind, which once collected can control all chromatic dragons. The stats for them are in the new Dungeon Master's Guide if you have it. They're a sort of good MacGuffin for your bad guys if you need something to plug right in, which is usually enough to build a campaign around, I think. What's fun about these Orbs of Dragonkind is the ability that reads, while you control the orb, you can take a magic action to cause the orb to issue a telepathic call that extends in all directions for 40 miles. If the bad guys get that, there is going to be... Tiamat is the most epic villain D&D has ever offered. I don't think the scale of the threat can get much bigger. There are rivals, for sure. Yes, Vecna is iconic and was in both Stranger Things and Critical Role. And I don't know, Vecna's probably more famous than Tiamat at this point. If the yardstick of fame was, would my parents know them? They both watch. Hi, Mom and Puppy. But I think Tiamat is the most epic. Sure, there's Orcus and Demogorgon, but I don't think they come close, actually. Because here's the thing, Vecna's lieutenants, if there are any, include a traitor, like Cass, and then maybe some Death Knights and vampires. Those are definitely scary stat blocks, but that's not how Tiamat lays down the law. Tiamat doesn't have those kinds of lieutenants. Instead, she's got lackeys. She commands dragons. Her armies are flights of dragons, and they say her lair is guarded by multiple flights. Armies of dragons are part and parcel of fights against Tiamat. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you'll probably remember our videos on action and resource economies, and they play into all of this. An army of dragons is exactly the sort of thing that I would attack our heroes' resources with, and it would give the leaders in Tiamat's army an edge in the lead up to the final fight. It also creates an excellent excuse for why the heroes have to face Tiamat alone. The paladins of Bahamut, the Silver Dragon Flight, and their ancient gold dragon commander will lead the battle against the dragon armies of Tiamat, but the heroes need to fight her themselves. That's what I call epic. Sure, you could run that as a mass combat if you bought Warriors of Krynn or Kingdoms in Warfare. You could run separate game nights for that kind of wargaming, or both at the same time. Either might be fun, but honestly, you could also just have that be set dressing. Good armies equals bad armies, and if the heroes kill Tiamat, the bad army scatters. But if the heroes lose against Tiamat, she joins the bad armies and kills all the good armies. Oh, and there is a middle step taken by Red Hand of Doom, which, spoilers for a 20-year-old D&D adventure, ends up with Tiamat showing up. In that adventure, you hear about the war plans of a hobgoblin army, and you have a chance to stop them. Every plan you stop equals some number of victory points. The victory points then directly determine the difficulty of the penultimate battle, which, thanks to the resource economy, indirectly determines the difficulty of the final battle. If then the final battle is lost, Tiamat joins the bad armies and kills the good armies. I want you all to notice how incredibly high the stakes are in all these situations. We're talking about massive armies, certain death, and possible world annihilation. When you're running 20th level adventures, you have to make them epic. In the grander sense. It's not enough to worry about stat blocks doing enough damage or monsters having enough attacks or actions. The entire situation has got to be terrifying. Losing has to have clear, world-ending stakes. If you properly communicate this to your players, something incredible happens. Every time the PCs miss an attack, or do suboptimal damage, or take significant damage, they won't be thinking about the math or the encounter. They're thinking, one more of those and the world might end. Every minor loss feels like they're edging closer towards the end of everything they hold dear. The death of their character's mother or spouse, or their adopted kobold, cheddar cheese. Failure has meaning. Dice rolls evoke real feelings. You'll get into situations where you think, I just have to hit this attack and we might be okay. And then they miss and shout curses. Or they manage to land a hit and they cheer with relief. When I ran Tiamat, my players were 19th level. And the adventure started with them being gathered like the Avengers. They had been in separate corners of the world fighting separate fights in this massive war. A couple of them had been fighting in Hell, standing on Gehenna, the city that crawls. And when they fought the Red Admiral and the archfiend Belial, they saw Tiamat flying in the sky above. She had escaped her prison. So they called the Kingmakers. Like summoning the Avengers, the party was brought together in the city of Mightall, where they met with the powerful lords they had built relationships with, not unlike the Council of Waterdeep from the Rise of Tiamat. So they quickly hatched a plan, and while they did, Tiamat conquered thousands of acres of land. Her armies marched in all directions, and the question had to be, what do we do next? The answer? I didn't tell them. I just told them how impossible it was. Okay, guys, how are you doing this?
We just go into her lair and fight her there.
It's another plane, and you don't have the tuning fork.
We could just charge into her lands, attack her head on. Why not? I've got the perfect build for it.
There's armies of dragons in the sky, like thousands of them, more than you could reasonably deal with.
We could make an alliance with the Duke of AVERNUS, enter her lair through Hell, since that's where she came from, sneak into the lair, steal the Orbs of Dragonkind, summon all the dragons to a different part of the material plane like 40 miles away, and as they fly away, Tiamat will likely come charging after us. In that moment, we split the orbs among our allies, so the dragons will split up, maybe. And then, when she's alone dashing after us, since we're still attuned, we take her alone before her dragons kill our allies with the orbs.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. Wild idea. Oh, Pearl the Warlock, your patron is reaching out. She's going to enter this plane through a weak spot in the ruined city you were in ages ago. Then she's planning on killing you and your recently born child if you don't stop her. Today.
Okay, we just summon the dragons in that ruined city, and then we kill your patron before the dragons show up, and then kill Tiamat afterwards.
When you're challenging top-level parties, you should be cooking up insane schemes that seem absolutely impossible to deal with. Then you sit back and you let your players tell you how they're going to fix it. Your job is essentially to turn their solution into an adventure. Come up with something clearly impossible, and you'll quickly learn that your players were put on this earth to humble you. So you humble them right back. Because Tiamat is a seriously monstrous creature. I mean, her stat block is insane. She's got a... I think the best way to illustrate the problem of high-level play, and high-level monsters in particular, is by comparing the two CR30 stat blocks that were available with the game back in 2014. I mean, they only released a total of 4 CR30 stat blocks for the 2014 edition, and 2 of them were Tiamat. But in 2014, your options were the Monster Manual's Tarrasque or the Queen of Dragons from the Tyranny of Dragons 2-part adventure module. Unfortunately, the Tarrasque is nowhere near strong enough to challenge a party of 20th level adventurers. Whereas Tiamat is, or at least is pretty close to, a perfect match. What do you think that is? For the purposes of explanation, I'll be looking into the 5e stat blocks quite intensely, but I'm sure there's plenty of transferable lessons to your equivalent heroic fantasy RPG, depending on the ease of conversion. To start with, let's look at the 2014 Tarask. Huge AC, massive hit points, 3 legendary actions, 5 attacks, bite, claw, horns, tail. Well, here's where we get into a little bit of trouble. In order to hit anyone with these attacks, the Tarask has to be able to get within 10 to 20 feet of its targets, which might be hard without any legendary movement speeds or similar things. Alright, I think I've seen enough. Let's go to Tiamat, my queen, to whom this video is dedicated. Well, she's got claw, tail, okay, neat, but she's also got 5 breath weapons, each a legendary action. This is actually a really dope stat block. The traditional dragon abilities, Elemental Bite and Dragon Heads, have been moved to the legendary action section. So Tiamat could breathe twice a turn and then bite and then multi-attack. Now her attack roster is supplemented by 2 huge area of effect abilities with massive damage outputs. And she won't have any issues getting into melee. She's got 120-foot fly speed. You can't outrun the Queen of Dragons. You also can't fly up into the sky to avoid her. She'll catch you. She's faster and better and stronger. She's also got some fun bonus features. 30 hit point regeneration, 5 legendary resistances instead of 3, and an extra reaction each round for each of her heads. She also has Divine Word, which means that as a bonus action, for 3 turns, she can just say a single word and it has a range of effects depending on a creature's hit points, including, by the way, anyone with 20 hit points or fewer dies. And since she's a god, in my game, I described it as her saying Tiamat in Draconic, and then killing PCs. One of my players responded, reasonably, he thought, by screaming his own name back at Tiamat.
Trekiros!
This is a great stat block, honestly. It utilizes areas of effect very efficiently, which I think is kind of essential to challenge a high-level party, basically. Since AoE does damage to everything in its area, the AoE scales with party size. I have loads of players at my table, and AoEs are very effective against them. It taxes their hit points evenly. Big scary boss monsters need AoEs because an attack to hit a creature can only hit a single creature. And more importantly, it can miss. With saving throws you succeed, you can still take half damage. Of course, damage resistances, immunities, save, etc. always factor in as well. You know, according to basic CR math, a CR 30 creature should be deadly to encounter for a 20th level party. And I think this stat block is pretty close to reaching that bar. Personally, I'd have given her a Mythic Phase. Wait, really? Apparently Fistband's Treasury of Dragons has their own Tiamat. It's called Aspect of Tiamat, which was a dragon instead of a fiend. Weird. And they gave her a Mythic Phase. She's got an effective 1,000 hit points. But the breath attack it can do as a Mythic Phase isn't as strong as the legendary breath from the earlier stat block. Wait, the legendary breath is gone. It's now just an extra spicy bite, like Indian food. And her average breath weapon damage is down, and there are half as many of them. This seems like a bunch of bizarre choices. She even lost her spellcasting, magic immunity, multiple reactions. Honestly, I would have gone the other route. More spellcasting. Mythic allows more breath attacks. Damn shame. Anyway, I combined the stat blocks and converted her to the 2024 rules and put a link in the video description. It's also on our Patreon, but the post itself is free to view. What's important about bosses at this scale is that their stuff should just kind of work. They're badass, they're scary, it's their turn. When the players have their turn, loads of stuff just works. Weapon masteries just do stuff. Spells have saved half mechanics. There's nothing Tiamat can do about the fact that the Echo Knight Fighter is about to action surge and do 9 attacks. So, there shouldn't be anything the players can do about the fact that Tiamat casts Divine Word. Except counterspell, I guess. Let your bosses do dope shit. And loads of it. A single standalone boss needs to have enough actions to outmatch a party. Flea Mortals introduces Villain Actions, a once per round legendary ability that is more powerful than a normal round, with massive AoE and powerful damage. And I think they're awesome. I really like them. But I have beef. Here's my beef. I don't think that one action is enough to counteract the need for legendary actions. I say do both. Make the big bad evil guy do a villain action, and then 4 other legendary actions. It's an end boss. Make it epic. Make it huge. The party is high enough level that they've got some resurrections up their sleeve, so you should just absolutely be killing PCs. And if you're getting to the end of the campaign, you should absolutely be killing PCs anyway. When else are you gonna do it, you coward? You know, there's a few more CR30 stat blocks out there. You could just go raid them, or combine them with the ones from Flea Mortals or Kingdoms in Warfare, if you have them. You could go design your own boss powerful enough to really put the screws on. I mean, I made my own version of the Invincible Overlord from Orton. I mean, you don't need to lean into pre-existing stuff. You can just make shit up. You don't even need Tiamat, especially if you're writing your own stuff. It's a WotC IP. So, you know what? This video isn't dedicated to Tiamat anymore. I don't need her. Fuck you, Tiamat.
Hey!
But the 5 heads, who cares? I don't. The legacy? More like baggage. It can all go eat dirt. You can do whatever you want. That's the point of the game. What if your Tiamat had 6 heads? Or what if she was a Hydra, and every time she took a certain amount of damage, a new head grew? You could call her Simone, or Jeff, or Clafurgathol. You could just make shit up. Everything in this video is a transferable lesson. Tiamat is just a decent running example. If you were watching along and you thought of ways these lessons could apply to your current boss monster, then hell yeah, do that. You can challenge 20th level characters. I think you'd be well served if you, in reverse order from where we started, design a roided up stat block monstrosity, lean into the scale, find the premise in the lore, use lore or myth to elevate your narrative, and you're on your way to make something your players will remember for decades. Who cares about anything else? You can use Tiamat. You can use Vecna. They exist as stat blocks, and I think there's a certain kind of cultural, nerdy braggability you get about having run Tiamat or having killed Vecna, and I think that's awesome. But it's not the reason your players are at your table. They're at your table because they want to tell stories with you, their friend, and they want to create these fictional memories of their own mythology. Stories of how they defied the impossible and persevered through impossible odds. That's the magic of RPGs. And 10 years later, if you're still playing with that same group, you can bring that BBEG back from the dead in an epic arc that'll catch them by surprise. And it'll have all the mythology of Tiamat behind it, but it'll be yours. You will own it, and no one will ever be able to take that away from you. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. And if you want to support us directly, you can check out our Patreon for a couple of CR30 stat blocks, fantasy calendars, a new class, and rules for firearms and hex crawls. Or if you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.